Saskatchewanian Jim Robson began his career in broadcasting at 17 when he covered senior men's basketball for a small radio station in Port Alberni, BC. Many games later, football, baseball, lacrosse, hockey. He is considered one of the icons of sport. It is my pleasure to welcome Jim Robson back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Thank you very much, Fanny.
How many games do you go to, hockey games, and think, I wish I'd gone dancing or somewhere else?
No, I never wish that.
I'm
not a good dancer. I move my feet like two rocks.
I see. Well, that's good because we like you at hockey. Mm-hmm.
Well, I enjoy the game very much.
So, knowing what you know about almost everything hockey, Atlanta Thrashers, going to go to Winnipeg, not going to go to Winnipeg. Stephen Brunt said yes.
Yes, the Globe and Mail broke it last night. I guess they're going, but it still doesn't seem to be finalized. The league wants to get a decision soon because they have to draw up the schedule for next season. But they'll probably drop two different schedules, one with Atlanta in and Winnipeg in, and sort it out. But that means teams moving out of divisions too. So there's a lot involved, and plus all the financial arrangements. So it would be great for Winnipeg to get back. And it was a sad thing for Canadian hockey fans when Quebec slipped away to Colorado and won the Stanley Cup the next year with a lineup that could have won it in Quebec. And then Winnipeg, of course, going to Phoenix. And so those cities loved the sport, and they were great places to go to hockey games, and it'll be good to have them back.
It sure will. But that Manitoba Moose, they have that goalie. He's called the Stork, I think.
Yes.
Do you know him, Eddie?
He's been quite a story. Eddie Locke. He's a Swedish goaltender, very tall, 6'5", 6'6".
Right.
Had a very good training camp with the Canucks, was scouted by the Canucks Swedish scouts like Lars Lindgren and Thomas Gradin, who work in Sweden for the Canucks. And he's been a real find. He had a terrific year in Manitoba. They didn't score many goals. Most nights the scores were like 2-1 and 1-0. And he was stopping a lot of shots, and he's a prospect.
How long does it take, and I know you're not a coach, but you watch so much hockey and you know so much about it, for a team to figure out a goalie? We saw this first game against Niemi, and it seems that our boys were kind of trying to figure out where to put that puck, high-low.
Things happen so quickly in the National League in front of the goal. You know, people say, why didn't they pick the top corner or something? Yeah. Well, you have a split second to make the decision, and basically they're just shooting the puck. Very few times do they get the opportunity to pick a spot. But they do so much preparation, there's so much coaching and video preparation. They know tendencies. And you could tell, for example, Roberto Luongo's had some problems with goals from the parallel to the goal or back of the goal line like he did in earlier series. And so early in game one of this series, you could see the San Jose wanted to put the puck to the goal crease from the corner or to make him handle the puck. And every goaltender, I guess, has some weakness, and Roberto's is handling the puck.
Well, and a lot of strategy talk in the locker room, I'm sure. You get on the ice and you're in the heat of the moment, and you have to do what you have to do. Oh,
yes. It's a very competitive business they're in, and the teams are all evenly matched. The whole league is like that.
How about our team, evenly matched?
Well, it's a very good team. You know, people ask me about comparing this team to the 1994 Canucks, and they're very similar. I thought the 94 Canucks was an excellent hockey team, and in fact, I thought Kirk McLean, through those playoffs, playing 24 games, winning 15, 4 shutouts, was more consistent in goal than Roberto Luongo has been. The defense is very similar, although this current Canuck defense is very mobile, good skaters, and perhaps an edge in that area. But in depth, the 1994 team had an excellent group of defensemen. And forwards, 94, they had more forwards who were scoring threats. You know, 7 or 8 experienced forwards led by Pavel Bure who could score goals. And whereas the present Canuck team has relied mostly on only 4 players to score the goals. You think of Daniel and Henrik Sedin, Ryan Kessler, and Alex Burrows. But fortunately in the playoffs, Higgins and Torres and some of these others have stepped up and helped in that area. But the 94 team had a lot of experienced forwards who could score.
But in 94, it seems to me, I think I heard you say this in a hockey night in Canada, that in 94, we were a bit of a long shot. the Canucks?
Well,
or
not so much as 82.
82,
Very
we
much
were
a long shot.
really a long
but
shot.
94, they had a team that was
Okay.
capable of winning the Cup. I've heard someone say here in the media recently, well, finally Vancouver has a team after 40 years, the best chance to win the Cup. Well, I argue with that. In 1994, they went to a 7th and deciding game and lost by 1 goal in the Stanley Cup Final. Well, that is a chance to win the Cup.
And you have it right here.
Well, I brought a couple of old programs along just to bring back some of the memories of the 2 previous times the Canucks were in the final, and hopefully they'll be in it again.
Hopefully they will. And what do you think the chances really are? And I know I'm asking you to predict like the pug.
Well,
Did you see the pug in the paper?
Well,
Maggie?
I see it as
She
you
says
pointed
we'll
it
take
out.
it in 6.
Well, everybody's got predictions.
Of
Many
course.
have predicted the Canucks would be out in the first round. I'm not surprised they beat Chicago or Nashville. I did think they'd have more trouble so far with San Jose, and this series is not over. San Jose have a lot of big forwards. The Canucks are not a big team. They're not an intimidating team. They're not a tough team, but they're very good with the puck. So it's tough for the other teams when Vancouver has the puck a lot of the time. And but they're not an intimidating team, and whereas San Jose have a lot of big forwards. I mean, Heatley is 6'4", Thornton is 6'4". They're big forwards, and but they haven't had a chance to be prominent in front of the net or in the Vancouver zone because the pucks have been controlled by Vancouver so much of the time.
Well, how about that Bieksa?
Well, he's a great
His
guy.
juices are
They've got
flowing.
to try very hard to keep him. He's coming up to free agency, and he can go anywhere to the highest bidder. And they'll have to work hard to sign him to keep him, because he's not only a good player, but he brings a lot of different ingredients to the team. He's one of the few guys that is feisty on that team, that is tough, but also he's a team leader. To win a championship, you have to have that core. You know, the Montreal Canadiens that won in the late 70s had that core of, and they weren't always the high scorers. They were like Bob Gainey and Larry Robinson and the key leaders. And then the same with any championship team. And the Canucks have that core with the Sedins, Kessler, Bieksa is part of that group. And those leaders are really important.
And do you think in playoffs a guy like Bieksa would say, I'm going to back off a little bit, I'm going to think about not going to the penalty box? I don't mean that he's a fighter particularly, but is that in the back of a hockey
Well, they do
player's
try and
mind
stay
or
out of the
not?
penalty box, because in this
course.
series, San Jose's 3 for 3 on the power play. So, and Thornton is a great passer, and he's a key player on their power play. So if you're in the penalty box, and just as the Canucks have made other teams pay, you have to try and stay out of the penalty box. But I think in the heat of the battle, you do what you have to do, and you play the style you have to play.
Sure.
And you're not worried necessarily about that.
The Sharks the other night, third period, a Wednesday, we're thinking, what's going on? I can probably get in the car and go to town because I think the Canucks are really going to win.
Well,
what happened in your eyes?
Well, of course, that game was unusual in that one player, really, Eager, is the one who sort of created a lot of this. The fight Bieksa had with, it was Marlowe who dropped the gloves first, and he's, I'm sure when I was sitting with a very knowledgeable hockey fan friend, is John McKittrick, longtime news announcer.
Great. Yes.
And I said, uh-oh, Marlowe's made a mistake here because Bieksa can fight. And that sort of started that series of incidents. But it was Eager going around hitting Daniel Sedin and then taking all those penalties. But that's his reputation. You just look at his career.
He's an enforcer of sorts,
yeah.
right?
And the Canucks don't have a player like that. And Detroit doesn't have a player like that. Nowadays, you don't have to have a goon in your lineup. You don't. It seems, if you know, the good, like Detroit's a good example. They didn't really have a player like that in their lineup. But Eager is that, and he led the American League in penalties when he played for Philadelphia's farm team. He's big. He weighs 230 or 40 or whatever he weighs, and that type of player can cause that kind of a game when it gets out of hand. And that's then up to the officials to call penalties that should be called. And there's inconsistency there. It's a very difficult game to officiate. And, you know, most observers, I think, felt that Eager should have received a major penalty for hitting Daniel
somebody
Sedin
was expecting a phone call.
and get him out of the game. And even if he didn't get a suspension, he'd be out of that game, and a lot of those incidents might not have occurred.
Well, do you think in playoff hockey that the refs back off at all in any way?
Yes, I do think they do. I think they would probably think this game is close, If we give him a 5-minute penalty, Vancouver's on a 5-minute power play in a close playoff game. I think those things come into an official's mind. I don't know, but I think there's the indications that the playoffs are different, and that they allow more borderline situations to go without a penalty.
And as you know, the goalie has to trust his defense, and if the defense comes through, that's good, and if it doesn't, well, what to do?
Well, and goaltenders too are being, like when Eager scored, he ran the goaltender, and lucky Luongo was a big, strong fellow, because they take a beating sometimes too.
Tell me about the towels. Did you remember who started the towels?
Oh yes, Roger Nielsen, a great coach and a wonderful man, who waved a towel at the bench in Chicago in 1982. The Canucks were in the conference final. They had won the first game, a great long overtime game, when Richard Brodeur outdueled Tony Esposito, and a fellow named Jim Nill scored 28 minutes into overtime. The Canucks won the first game. The second game, they ran into a series of penalties and were behind Chicago, and they didn't like the officiating of Bob Myers, the referee. So Roger, who was a very mild guy, never swore a day in his life, and he decided to protest in a mild way. He took a towel off the back of the bench, stuck it on a stick, and held it in the air, and some of the players joined him in a protest. They were surrendering because they thought the poor officiating. Well, the league overreacted. Roger got thrown out of the game. 3 or 4 players got thrown out, but they didn't get all the guys that had the towel on the stick. And the league then fined the Canucks, I think it was $10,000. And there was time between that game and the next game, but John Plewell, who you're familiar with, was the
Mr.
promotions
Public
man
Relations.
at CKNW. He had a lot to do with the success of the towels, because he and Butch Giroux, who had the T-shirt place in Gastown.
Oh, really?
And so
Butts Giroux.
Oh, Butts Giroux.
Yeah, Butts Giroux.
So
he won the belly flop contest.
Yes, that's right. So they combined to have 5,000 towels printed up, and Plewell had them handed out at the Pacific Coliseum. So fans were asked to come to the rink waving a white towel, and those that didn't were handed one as they went in the arena, as they are at the games now.
Now it's a trademark.
And
it really is.
so that's where it started. Now you watch the World Series, you watch the NFL games, you watch NBA games. A lot of fans in a lot of buildings wave towels or white
something, or they're all orange, or they're this, or they're that, or
so
they
I
have
think
green
that's where
men,
it started. Yeah.
Something of that ilk. So tonight, the Shark Tank, not on home ice.
No, it does make a difference in hockey, and yet Canucks have a very good road record, the best in the league in the regular season, and they've won on the road in the playoffs as they did in Nashville, and so they're a good road team. But it is different because in hockey, the changes are made on the fly or when there's a stoppage in play, and the home team has the last change. So the referee will go by the bench, put his arm in the air, and say, no more changes. So he'll do that to the visiting team, and then the home team can counter. So it means the home coach can match up who should be on the ice at that time. So he can put his best defenseman out against the other team's best forwards and so on.
Okay, well, I'll be watching. You stay out of the penalty box.
Oh, thanks, Fanny.
How nice to see you.
Good to be here.
I know you'll come back because you'll have to polish off that cup.
Anytime you invite me, I'll be here.
Okay, I want to see you in the parade.
Oh, yes.
You know, the victory
Well, I won't
parade.
be in the parade, but I'll be standing on the curb
I bet
waving.
you'll be in the parade.
I don't think so.
Jim Robson.